I'll do a roll call. Committee member Banker,
Present.
committee member Papalia, committee member Papalia,
Here.
committee member Priven,
Here.
vice chair Trainer,
Present.
and chair Kerr.
Present. So the first agenda item will be the approval of the minutes for the prior meeting.
Are we doing comments first, or should I just make a motion to accept them?
Comments are welcome.
On the comments.
Other committee members, any comments on the minutes or the prior meeting?
Nope.
Okay, move to accept. You have a motion to accept?
Move to accept.
I'll second.
Okay, so committee member Banker,
I abstain. I was not present.
committee member Papalia,
Yes.
committee member Priven,
Yes.
committee vice chair Trainer,
Yes.
and chair Kerr.
Yes. And just as a point of order, folks who are not here at the prior meeting don't necessarily need to abstain from the approval of the minutes, but respectfully appreciated. So agenda item number 1.
So the next item is announcements.
Yes, I have an announcement. I read an article in a newspaper, and I've seen a couple things online about a new initiative in the state of California that will probably or could be on the November ballot that would allow sports betting on tribal lands. And also included in that is sports betting in privately owned tracts in 4 counties. And that would include Alameda County for Golden Gate Fields. So there is a potential for expanded gambling at Golden Gate Fields that's going to be on the ballot. And I would like to be able to get, some kind of information about how that might work and how that revenue would be, how if we would get any kind of proceeds from that revenue. Did anyone hear about that or read about that one?
No, thanks for pointing that out.
There was one other thing that was noted, that the presentation at the last meeting, the PowerPoint that you did, Heather, was great, but is a couple of things. Is I did not note it being posted in the documents for the last meeting. Did I miss it, or did you not intend to?
No, I finished it about 10 minutes before the meeting. So it wasn't with the agenda packet, but we can post it if you'd like.
Right. And I mean, first of all, it's great. And one thing that I might be nice is that you had the slides, and then you basically talked a bit about each slide. And I was wondering if it was possible to have kind of a power, you have the slide and then the highlights of that slide that that you could, I mean, you were probably reading, maybe you were reading off of something that included all that text, because the reason why is because it basically is a primer for anybody who is interested. And it would be nice to, that so you wouldn't necessarily have to listen to the whole thing. And particularly me, I could refer to it. So that was one thing that would be nice. And then also in your PowerPoint presentation, if you can make sure you don't use any more acronyms that I and other people don't know, particularly if it's in a PowerPoint, because you could just spell it out. Okay, that's all.
Are there any other comments before we move to public comment?
For me.
If not, are there any public comments? Do we have any written comments submitted to the committee or any public comments from participants at this point?
I did not get any written comments. If there is one participant, if they would like to comment, they just need to raise their hand. I don't see any hands raised.
In that case, we are at item number 5, which is the biennial budget covering fiscal years 21, 22, and 22, 23 from Heather. Are you ready?
Sure. So the item that was attached to your packet is exactly what I presented to council on the 17th during their study session. We asked council for more direction on what they really wanted the Financial Advisory Committee to focus on. And there was one suggestion made for you to look at the police budget. And then there was just general comments about, the budget in general. So it's pretty wide open what you guys want to do. The only changes that were made based on the discussion on the 17th is the items that they requested for the sugar sweetened beverage tax were added into the budget, but those are the only changes, and it's less than $100,000 of expenses that was added to the operating budget. The item that you have in front of you is specifically the operating budget. It has 4 different funds in it. It has the general fund. It has the emergency medical services fund. It has the sewer funds, and then it has the storm drain fund. Historically, the storm drain fund has not been treated as an operating fund. However, in discussion with the auditors and looking at what other cities around us have been doing, it should be considered an enterprise fund similar to sewer. The difference is that it is a fee-based fund and it is self-sustaining. That is basically what qualifies something as an enterprise fund. And so we will be transitioning the storm drain fund to be an enterprise fund, which means that it will function as an operating fund. So that's what you have in front of you is the operating funds. The item that is going to council next Monday and was just posted includes special revenue funds as well. We've restructured how we do the city budget. In previous years, there were operating funds or operating expenses sprinkled throughout all of the funds. Now the city has over 80 individual funds. And so it's very difficult to figure out when it's spread out like that, what we're really spending money on. So staff over the last few years have worked really hard to move all of the operating expenses into the specific operating funds. If there are special revenues that help support those operations, they are recorded as a transfer in or a revenue to the operating funds, and they are specifically called out. The one that I always refer back to is the Public Works Parks maintenance lines. The parks maintenance is funded by 4 special revenue sources. The new Measure M, the Parks Open Space and Recreation Special Parcel Tax, And then it's funded by lighting and landscaping district assessment fees that are still kind of left over from a bond. And then there's another lighting and landscaping district that is actually still active. Measure M replaced the lighting and landscaping district assessment from 1996. The lighting and landscaping district from 1988 is still active in collecting fees. So that is basically how we have structured the budget, and what you have in front of you is the operating budget. Now, I'm not sure whether you want me to go over it again. I don't know if you guys watched the presentation before, if you had specific questions that you wanted to dive into, or how, Chair Kerr, how would you like to move forward with this?
I'm most interested in a poll of the committee members and see what other folks have heard or are interested in. And I also want to sort of preempt with a question about whether this will come before us in the future prior to the council, or whether we will continue to follow the council in the presentation.
It should come to you before.
Okay.
The reason that it went to council first this year was we were still trying to get further direction from council on exactly what they wanted you guys to do. But going forward, it will come to you before it goes to council.
That's encouraging. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Member Banker.
Thank you. I mentioned, I see in your report too, Heather, you said once adopted, changes can be made at any time by resolution of city council. In addition, staff will continue to provide quarterly budget updates. So it's like, it's not set in stone. So, okay.
Never.
Member Priven, please.
Yeah, so I do have some just general questions about the budget. And so I'm happy to just put those on the table. They don't have to be addressed now or whatever, but I'm happy to just lay out just some general thoughts that I had looking at it.
Please go ahead with your thoughts.
Okay, so one thing is, I noted that the budget we're budgeting a deficit. And so that concerned me. And so I guess I'm just wondering where the money comes from to pay for that deficit, and how much money do we have? Are we spending money that we have? Or are we spending money that we don't have? And if we have it, how much do we have? So I guess that's one sort of question or series of questions. And then the other one, I guess, maybe about police, but just about the bigger departments in general, whether it's fire, police, public works, is how do we compare ourselves to other cities, or like how do we test the reasonability of what's being asked for? I don't really know, but I'm just wondering how sort of lay people like us can kind of look at the budget and go, yeah, that makes sense. It's a big increase, but they've been understaffed and that makes sense. Or no, that seems out of line. So I'm just wondering how we kind of approach that question without having really a background in municipal finance. So those are my sort of big picture questions.
So, Chair Kerr, you want me to go ahead and answer?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, sure. So first I'll talk about the deficit and the fund balance. Yes, it is a concern that we have a deficit. It is something that needs to be addressed, especially since we're looking at rising pension costs, and we need to start planning for asset replacement and repair going forward. There are major things that are coming up, and a budgeted operational deficit is not great to continue. We do have a fund balance, which municipal accounting, it took me a little while before it finally clicked. Fund balance is to accounting what owner's equity is to like private accounting. So we have a savings account, which is basically our fund balance. And that is what we would draw on if we did recognize a deficit. And we don't anticipate recognizing a deficit in the current year. Since we are becoming fully staffed, we may recognize a deficit in future years, but as we go on, we are definitely closer to recognizing a deficit than we were. We have a fund balance of just over, oh, hold on, let me pull up the report and I'll give you an exact number. We have a fund balance as of the end of fiscal year 20 of 7.18 million. The general fund reserve policy passed by council calls for a 25% balance that is specifically there for, economic downturns, like when COVID happened and our sales tax dropped, to cushion and not have us, raise taxes in other areas, to have to, overcome that in 1 year. Or if, there was a natural disaster and we needed to have quick access to cash. The council, I did a risk analysis and council decided that 25% was the correct amount to have as our fund balance policy. That 25% is compared to the budgeted expenses. So our general fund or proposed general fund expenses for fiscal year 21-22 are 26.2 million. So 25% of that is 6.5 million. So we have 7.1, we need 6.5 to maintain the 25%. If we recognized 1.8, I think we got it down to. If we recognize next year a $1.8 million deficit, we drop below the 25, but we still have money there. But obviously there isn't enough to continue to take 1.8 million out of fund balance for very long, since we only have, 7 million in there. So the deficit has to be addressed. It is something that staff have tried to address partly with cuts to the other expense lines, but the salaries and benefits in general are 70% of municipal budgets. There's very little that we can do without cutting staff to cut salaries. We've cut part-time salaries, part-time help, because that doesn't cut funded positions, but we're also looking at additional revenue streams. We want to look at the business license tax and see if we can restructure that and potentially, increase it. But that is something that has to go to voters, and it won't be an immediate revenue generator. So passing the two tax increases last year was an effort to start to reduce that. Those increases were offset by the decrease in sales tax because of COVID. So there was, it was a little rocky there, but yes, it needs to be addressed. But it's a very large number. And at this point, staff has done what we can without major policy decisions on what programs and services are essential and which programs and services we might need to cut.
Thank you. It's a very succinct description.
And if you think about it, when you're thinking about special revenue funds, like we have a lot of cash. That was one thing that the auditors said when they came in. They were like, you guys have a lot of cash. And I was like, no, but I can't use any of it. Special revenue funds are great in theory. They're earmarked. They support a very specific thing. But if I don't have the general money to pay the city manager, the public works director, and whatever, having money for parks isn't going to do anything because there's no one there to administer it. So special taxes are great in theory, but also hamstring operations. So what we really need are general taxes.
And so is there process for making those sort of policy decisions? I mean, is there a strategic planning, or that has that already been done and now you're already implementing it with new taxes or whatever? Like, where are we in that process of thinking about?
It's really a council decision. And I mean, at this point, I think the council is looking at you guys to say, do you have any ideas for us? So staff, my theory when we put together a budget is this is what we as professionals believe it will cost to run the city at the level that we are currently running it. So we are providing the same services at the same service level. This is what it's going to cost. So at that point, we have to come back to policymakers and say, is it worth it to you? You know, which programs, we can argue about what we want to fund, but we can't necessarily argue about what a pencil costs, right? So that's where, you know, that's really where we're looking. Staff needs direction at some point to say, this is where we need to make larger structural changes. And then your second question was in how do we compare to other cities? We do that on kind of a case-by-case basis. Like I said, salaries are a large part, and we have done salary studies to see how we compare to other organizations. We have done, for example, when I first got here, they had already done an organizational study for the finance department to see if the finance department was running, you know, at the optimal levels and all of that kind of stuff. And we've done one for the fire department, and I think they did one for recreation. And recreation's obviously doing their master plan. And so there's, it's kind of on a piecemeal basis. If you asked me to go look at go see what surrounding people are doing, then yeah. Police did specifically come up at one point, and we are on average for, you know, what portion of the general fund budget is dedicated to police. So.
I've also got just a list of questions. I don't know if it's appropriate to just list them off at this point. I know Anne's got some too.
Please go ahead. I think this is an appropriate point for those.
All right. I'm just going to throw these out there, and then they can be addressed at points where it makes sense. And some of these kind of are bouncing off of questions that Member Priven asked. First question, a couple of basic ones to just familiarize myself with your process. But you mentioned, Heather, last meeting, that the budgeting process is supposed to reflect the strategic initiatives or strategic goals of the council. And so the first question is, in the budgeting process, did the city receive direction or instructions from the council as to its strategic plan? So how does that work back and forth?
The council hasn't actually done their strategic plan yet. So we're still working off of the old strategic plan, but the budget has to be passed by July 1st. So there's, you know, balancing there, but it's really department by department. You know, the council works with the city manager, and then the city manager directs department heads to implement different things. Some of those things are implemented immediately because we can do them within budgeted amounts. Some of them we can't. So we need to either make additional appropriations, or we wait until the annual budgeting process where we say, okay, if you want this program, so for example, if we want to beef up our homeless outreach, then neighborhood services needs to double their budget, right? So that comes with the annual budget update. It's not something that we bring piecemeal because it's very important to take that in context with the rest of the budget.
Okay. I was looking at the budget and trying to make sense of it and sort of different ways. And a lot of my questions surround personnel, staffing levels, salaries, things like that. And one of the things that I was having trouble putting together from the format that you have here is there another schedule that shows expenses by natural expense category? So total salaries, total benefits, total, whatever other type things, just so that we could get an idea, because I'm imagining the salaries will be the biggest line item in this budget overall. And it would be helpful to just see that. And then a couple other questions to sort of go along with that. In looking at the different the different departments, you gave us a staffing schedule that shows the change in staffing amongst the departments, and there was some staffing kind of switching around that you explained about the assistant to the city manager, I think, retiring, and a deputy city clerk coming on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a management analyst coming on. So there were some changes there, but pretty much the other departments maintained the same staffing level. So we're up 1 FTE in total. And what was confusing to me is that the departments, some of them have like a, 2% increase in total salaries or 4%, which seems reasonable to me if you're maintaining the same staffing levels. But some of the departments had really fluctuating salaries. So police salaries were down quite a bit, fire salaries were up, but they have the same overall staffing levels.
Right. So there was a change in how we budgeted salaries across the city. We updated our accounting system. We updated it in January, and the salary projection module broke. So I did everything manually in addition to my spreadsheet breaking. So normally when we put everything into the salary projection module, vacant positions are budgeted at top step with maximum benefits. Now, when we immediately hire someone, they're not going to get longevity. They're not, necessarily going to qualify for every single incentive available. But that was how we budgeted it, just to make sure that, over time, when they reach top step, it's not, in addition to any cost of living adjustment and any step increases, you're just seeing like small increases over time instead of like an 8 or 12% increase year over year, because I budgeted someone at step 1 with no incentives, and all of a sudden they're at step 5, right? When I budgeted it manually, instead of adding all incentives anyone could possibly get, I averaged the incentives that employees are getting currently. So I budgeted new positions or vacant positions at top step, but only with the average amount of incentives that people are actually getting. So that dropped police quite a bit, because the police MOU has a number of incentives that people could qualify for, and they've consistently had quite a few vacant positions, and now those positions are getting filled. When a position is filled, we budget it at actual, assuming that they will get a step increase in whatever the MOU calls for. So that is the difference between what you normally see, historically have seen, and what is here now, is because I manually did it and I did an average instead of the system doing max everything.
So the police salaries are actually going down by about 12%. Is that because you're budgeting people coming in to replace other people at a lower step?
Yes.
Okay.
We've also had some retirements. So.
Okay. And do you have any kind of figures about what the average salary increase is, either in total or by department or anything like that?
So budgeted or theoretical?
And I guess in the in the budget. So like in a typical for-profit organization, managers might be told, okay, you get 3% across your department and you can divvy that up amongst your people how you want, but it has to be 3% in total. But I imagine you're constrained by union rules and other things.
Right. So and this is where I think the item that we specifically, the 213-page document that we just posted is going to be helpful in the future. One of those items, and I will share it now, is a list of the MOU changes that are coming up in the next biennium. So the firefighters, they have 3 changes that are coming up from in the 2021-22 and 2022-23 years. So they are adding longevity pay for at 14 years of service at 2.5% of the step 7 fire engineer, effective December 21st, 2021. They are also getting a 3.5% increase effective the first full pay period following January 1st, 2022. And then they'll get another 3.5% effective the first full pay period following January 1st, 2023. This is the police. They are getting a base salary increase of 3% effective November 2021, and then a 3% effective November 2022. And then we're adding a longevity pay of 2.5% for employees who have completed 10 years of service at some point during the next 2 years, apparently. I didn't add a date there. SEIU, the SEIU agreement, this is, what are they? Technical staff and maintenance workers. So our accounting techs, some of the recreation staff, office assistants, those kind of employees are in the SEIU union. Their contract ends September 30th, and we don't have another one yet. So they are getting a 6th step effective July 1st, 2021. So each step is basically 5%. So anyone who qualifies and, is it qualifies for a merit promotion and is already at step 5 would increase to step 6, and they'd get a 5% increase. And then I also budgeted a 3% cost of living adjustment assumed it, when we do new negotiations. We did not budget, specifically because of the deficit, we did not budget any cost of living adjustment or anything like that for unrepresented employees. Unrepresented employees also did not get a raise last year either.
Just a couple other questions that have to do with the staffing. So we're budgeting about 109 FTEs. And do you have benchmarking of how that would compare to other California cities of similar size, or in some other way that would be comparable to Albany? So
again, it really depends on the department. So when the finance study was done, they said that we were fine at the staffing level that we were, but then when I got in here and realized that there were additional things that needed to be done, we needed another staff member. I'm not sure what happened with the fire study. The city manager's office does that. But yes, we do that periodically. I like to say that Albany is a small city that likes to be a big city, and we have a lot of services for a small city. So it's hard to look at comparables because there really aren't that many. I mean, you can't compare us to Berkeley or Oakland. Sometimes we'll look at Piedmont and see if we're, in the same level as them. But I mean, if you look at recreation, for example, you really have to look at what is their recreation department offering versus what we're offering. So it's very hard to look at the cities just like city by city and full FTE count. You really have to get into department by department and what services are being offered.
Okay. And then my last question is, you did mention just a little while ago about how we have a lot of cash, but a lot of it is restricted for special revenue uses. During the budgeting process, is there a component to it that does sort of cash flows forecasting of your general fund cash as opposed to your more restricted or special revenue fund cash, so that we have an idea of, are we going to run out of cash at any point, during the foreseeable future?
So we're definitely not going to run out of cash for the foreseeable future. If you're looking at the general fund versus other funds, remember the general fund has a fund balance of $7.1 million. I'm not cutting $7 million worth of checks in a month. So the answer is no, I haven't done a cash flow analysis, because we haven't needed to at this point, and there have been other fires that needed to be put out.
Mm-hmm.
But I know we are not borrowing against special revenue funds to fund general fund operations. That is the trouble that El Cerrito was in.
Mm-hmm.
We do not have that. And it would go to council before anything like that would happen.
Oh, and I had one other one too, which was you mentioned that we are not currently budgeting for sort of sinking funds for large asset purchases and that sort of thing because of the deficit budget. But if we were to budget for those types of future large expenditures, how much will we need to budget?
So we aren't budgeting for them because we just historically haven't, and there weren't reserve funds for a number of things. In May of 2020, so fiscal year 20, staff brought a capital reserve fund policy to council to establish reserve funds. So the reserve funds exist and have some money in them. How much we need to save really is a much larger question. It's something that I broach in the larger budget booklet that's going to council on Monday. I will share again. So I have a list of things that basically, these are the things that we're going to need to replace in the next 5 years. The question of whether we save for them or whether we bond for them or borrow in some other way needs to be had, because if, I need to have $1 million in, 2 years, we can't necessarily save $1 million in 2 years, but would we even want to? What is it for? Is it something that qualifies for bonding? In order to qualify for bonding, it has to have a larger or a life expectancy of at least 15 years. And it has to be so much, money. Like, we aren't going to go out. I talk about in the larger booklet, the 2 debt service issues that we currently have outstanding. Well, we have 3 outstanding, but one of them was for storm drains, and it wasn't large enough to do a normal bond like you think of. So we did a private bond, and Chase holds that bond because it was like $3 million. It's not worth it fee-wise to go out to like full bond, but our general obligation bond was $14 million. And so it was, worth it to go out to bond. And what are we bonding for? If we do want to bond for, that $1 million item, are there other things that we could bond for? Do we want to bond for street improvements? Do we want to? So we need to save a lot of money. Let me try to find the lists for you. So for police, they estimate that they need to replace these items in the next 5 years, and it's a total of about $600,000. Their reserve fund has $260,000 in it. I have no idea where these lines went, by the way. They were there when it was in Word, and I converted it to PDF, and they all went away. So the fire department is going to need $2.6 million worth of things. Obviously, this ladder truck is one of the big ones. We may be able to get a grant for certain things. We got a partial grant for our last fire truck. This fire truck we only need because we're starting to have more housing development, and we haven't done that before. So it might be a new need for the city where it wasn't expected. And so somebody may have a grant for that type of thing. We will look for those, but you can't rely on grants for this type of thing. So they need $2.6 million worth of equipment. They have $425,000 in their fund at the end of 20. They've already planned on purchasing a vehicle and some other piece of equipment. I don't know what firefighters do. It's fine. And so they'll end up with $327,000. The emergency medical services equipment reserve, they need to purchase some heart monitors and an ambulance with a gurney, and that's going to be $350,000. There's only $220 in the account. The IT reserve, we did an IT strategic plan. This is one of the things that, both Mark and Kim were talking about, where, do you compare yourself to other cities? What we had somebody come in and do a strategic plan, looking at what we have, what other people have, and for security purposes, what do we need to get to? Well, they decided we needed to spend $1.7 million in the next 5 years to bring everything up to speed. So does this help answer your question, Kim?
Yeah, definitely. This is kind of going department by department. And I also just sort of wonder, I've seen other kind of analyses of this type of thing where you basically kind of start off with almost like with your fixed asset schedule.
Yes.
And you're looking at remaining useful life of different items. And so it could be swing sets or fire trucks or signage or anything. And they go through and they calculate when things will need to be replaced because where are they in their useful lifespan? And then sort of, discount that out to the present value of the funding that would be needed for that, and then chip away at it year by year.
So we had a physical inventory done in February of 2020, and we are starting to work off of that. This is kind of the first step in discussing, okay, these are the items that we're going to need in the next 5 years. Obviously, there's going to be more going out, and when I have it on my list of things to do to contract out. I have to review the contract right now. I got a proposal for it. Someone is going to take that physical inventory that we had done, that we have updated with, some of the things that we had it updated obviously for the 2020 audit, and we've updated it periodically. But they're going to take that and actually put it into the accounting system so that we can do this in a better way on a more regular basis. But the structure for that wasn't here when I got here. So it's something that we're currently working on. And I do have those lines that you said, what is the condition that the asset's in now? When do we expect it to be replaced? What do we expect the replacement cost to be? And so that my goal is to have, okay, what do we need to replace within the next year? What do we need to replace within the next 5 years? What do we need to replace within the next 10 years? And what do we need to replace beyond that? But this, before I have all of that together in a pretty package that I can, put a bow on and hand to everyone, I wanted to make sure that we had something. And so this, what I am presenting to council on Monday, is really the beginning of that conversation of, I know these numbers look shocking, but these are the numbers that we have. There may be additional items. These are the things that we know we're going to need to replace. What if something breaks? That's also what the reserves are there for. That's not in these numbers.
I completely agree. I think that there's always a focus on, what new thing do we want to add, but you've got to build in a maintenance budget for anything that you acquire, because eventually it'll wear out or break or become obsolete, and it needs to also be replaced just to sort of maintain the level that you're currently at. And if we're not having that discussion, then there's going to be, bad surprises of additional things. So I love that you put this together, and probably once everyone starts thinking about this list is going to double.
Right. And that's really the thing. The new fire truck is there, but also the ambulance with the gurney isn't a new ambulance. It's a replacement of one that we have. The recreation one that I have up here, upgrade. And a lot of these things, the IT one, obviously, a lot of it's new because IT stuff changes every minute. But, for KALB and, we need to update cameras, and we need to update, the projectors. So a lot of these things are regular maintenance. General repairs are budgeted in the operating budget. But we do need to have a cushion in these reserve funds for when something just breaks because it broke, not necessarily because it's too old and we haven't replaced it for too long and all of that. So we're working towards a more comprehensive strategy, but this was really the first step, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Thank you. Member Trainer, do you have any other questions, or
that was it? Thank you. Thank you.
Runs it out. Anyone else? Member Banker, go ahead.
Thank you. One of the words that pops in is depreciation schedules. Those would be handed. Those are really great for vehicles, and they budget right in, and that's all I've been thinking about with that conversation. Mark mentioned the concern. I'm wondering how his concern about the deficits, and I'm right there with you. I'm wondering about how the Economic Development Committee fits with these deficit concerns. I know they're doing economic development for the community and stuff like that, but that translates into revenue. Doesn't economic development transfer into revenue? So I'm wondering, in combination, how is that? How do these committees overlap in relationship to this, or is there something that goes on that a subcommittee? So that's just a question out there I'm kind of wondering about.
Member Denker, do you have thoughts on how that might fit into policy recommendations to council?
Just how that I'm asking how the Economic Development Committee, how that would interface. I don't have any.
Well,
go ahead.
Be bold.
Exactly.
Come up with a suggestion about how we can recommend to council that the Economic Development Department actually does enhance the revenues for the city in a way that's measurable in our bottom line.
Is that something we should be doing with the group here to make that
absolutely sense? In my view, yes.
Then that's then how to do that. Like all of you, I'm fairly new to city stuff, so I don't want to step on anybody's toes here. But understanding, having the council understanding how the revenue fits with economic development might be an education in itself. That would steamroll something or snowball something, I imagine.
Excellent points. Excellent points.
Is that all for that one, or can I go on to other questions? Or do you
No,
want-
please go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Heather, one thing I had wanted to understand is on your revenue sheet was understanding explanation of the method for projecting out revenue. Like when I'm looking at, like just an example, when I'm looking at the property tax, this is the city manager proposed budget, general fund, the revenues and expenses, the one sheet one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering how we can end up with, $8,114,776 in property taxes at the end of 2020. And we've only, we're looking at 8,000, 8 million, sorry,
Right.
035 in 2022.
So the property tax line includes penalties and late payments. So the actuals received in fiscal year 2019-20, in theory, we got more than we thought we would because people didn't pay from prior years and were paying late. For a while, we had been receiving less than we were budgeting. So I kept it stagnant for 1 year.
Okay.
And now I've been increasing the budget projection based on the amount that the assessor says that they think the assessed value will go up for the next year. I say the amount that they think because it's the estimate that they give me in March versus the actual that they give me later in the year, but I don't have it for this thing. The other thing is that this isn't just real property tax. This is also unsecured tax, which is business property tax. So any machinery or equipment that businesses in Albany have is taxed as property tax. And that is anticipated to actually go down because of the business closures due to COVID.
Okay.
Any other questions, Member Banker?
Yes, please. One other one, which was right where, economic development. Oh, just one little thing. Getting down nitty gritty here. I have one question. Back to the summary sheet, the original one I was just working on. There's a $20,000 difference between your fiscal year 19-20. Let me see here. Does not match summary. Okay, let me start again. Sorry. On the summary sheet, the fiscal year 2019-20, sorry, that total, the 22,274, doesn't match the one on 2020 for revenue of 22,294.
Yeah, so I had to update some equations. As I was explaining before the meeting started, my spreadsheet broke and I had to redo it.
No more further. Thank you very much.
So those have been fixed for the one that is going on Monday.
I think I'm fine. I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee members want to make a comment or have a question?
Yes.
Member Papalia, go ahead.
Okay. First, the city clerk expenses is going up $136,213. That's for the new position, correct?
Yes.
Does that amount include all expenses, including pension?
Yes. Yeah, pension is, so if you look at the city clerk budget itself, let me find that. So the way I break it down is salaries and wages includes just that, salaries and wages for full and part-time employees, including overtime. Then the benefits line is broken down into insurance, which includes health insurance, dental insurance, life insurance, all insurance. Retirement includes any pension payments. In addition, there are a handful of people that get an ICMA of 457 retirement contribution. So that retirement line includes those two things. And then taxes are FICA, Medicare. I think that's it. So that's how I break that down. So yes, the overall increase to the city clerk budget for that amount includes all, employment taxes, pension costs, health insurance costs, and it's budgeted assuming that she's going to take, or not she, he, whoever takes the job, is going to be taking, full family health insurance and max benefits for everything.
So that's not filled yet.
No, we haven't. In order for us to fill the position, this budget has to be approved.
Okay. Now, those are expenses. I'd like to move a little more about how we can increase our income or revenue. You said that the sales tax revenue has gone down. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you're projecting it to go up or recover?
So, not immediately. It's still very up in the air. Obviously, the economy has come back up, has started to come back up. Originally, people were saying that it was going to take a lot longer. And then after a while, they were like, oh no, it's coming back a lot quicker. And there's also the added confusion of the online sales tax change, law change. So we increased our collections because of the change to the online tax collection. So it's very hard to determine how much of the increase that we've seen in the past few months is because of the law change or is because of the economy coming back up. So basically, in 2019, we maxed out at, I think it was like 2.4 million. Sales and use, 4.5 million in collections. And then last year we dropped down, which is fiscal year 20, we dropped down to 3.8 million. Now I know we've collected more than I think we were going to lose because of the initial shock due to COVID. So we had brought this year's budget when we did the update in February. I think it was February. We brought the anticipated collections up to 3.9 million. I've left that the same because while I don't think it's going to drop, not convinced it's going to increase very quickly. And I'd rather budget conservatively and be pleasantly surprised that we got more revenue than we thought.
Okay, just and a note on this graph, on this spreadsheet here that we have is, I'm assuming the far right column should say fiscal year 2022, 2023.
Yes.
That's just it. Because it says 20, so it's still labeled 2021, 2022. That should be, that's just a mislabeling.
Oh, yes.
Line, the green bar.
Yep, I see.
Proposed budget 2021, 22, and then it says, it repeats it.
You're correct. It should be.
Yeah, just a clerical thing. Okay. It should be. All right, so that's now where in the budget is the projections of cash that we would get from the Fed and
It's
state?
not in the budget. That money is not, you can't use it to support, so it's one-time money. And it can only be used for, there's 4 categories of things that it can be used for. It can replenish fund balance for revenue losses associated with COVID. So that loss from 4.5 million down to the 3.8 in 2020, we should be able to replenish fund balance by, that difference. I'm still looking at whether it's overall, whether it's by category. I have to do a lot more research on that. So we should be able to take some of that money and move it into replenish fund balance. But that is not part of the budgeting process.
Right. But how much money are we talking about in general?
When I looked, it was 4 million.
Okay, I just want to know about that. So it's 4 million. So we should be able to, that's also the kind of money that you could buy a fire truck with. Is that correct?
No, it has to be used for COVID related expenses. The 4 categories are public safety, like related to COVID expenses, covering any pay increases that you made that were related to hazard pay up to $13, broadband infrastructure, or there's a 4th one that doesn't apply to us at all. And I can't remember what it is because it doesn't apply to us.
What part is you said replenishing?
It's the then that was that. Never mind. That's the 4th one. Is
okay, replenishment. Okay,
yeah.
that's what we really want to push.
Revenue recovery.
Revenue recovery. Got it. Revenue recovery. Very good. Recovery. Okay.
So those are severely restricted funds.
Very much. And we're going to have to do special audits for those. There's going to be very strict ways we can use them, how we have to account for them.
And how will they appear, Heather, as a line item on the budget reports going forward?
They won't. They will go to council separately.
Is it CARES Act money, or what law is this from?
So we've already used all of our CARES Act money that was partially included in the 2020 audit. And then we actually received the money in 2021. It's held in a special revenue fund. And so that CARES Act money, we got like $233,000 from. This is the federal recovery, FRA, Federal American Recovery Act, some weird name that somebody came up with.
Can the health and safety to be tied into EMS at all?
It can be. So any costs that we did for, additional cleaning, additional protective equipment that we needed, if we need to buy, air filters, things like that, the adjustments to workstations that had to be made, the plexiglass that we had to put in front of the counters, all of that kind of stuff can be reimbursed by the CARES Act, or not CARES Act, the new federal money.
Okay, great. All right.
I got more.
Keep going.
Okay.
If you got more, you gotta go.
Grants. We used to have someone in the city who's moved on to a different city who was a great grant writer. Do we have someone who's like a professional grant writer that can hopefully, it should be easily obtain more money through grants than what we pay them?
So we are currently contracting with a company to help us with grants. They help us write grants. They help us track the grant expenditures and do all the reporting because it's obnoxious. And they actually help us find grants too. So if we say, I want to do this thing, they will go and scour, I don't even know where, to find grants for us to apply for.
And where are they in this budget?
They are under the finance professional services budget.
Okay, very good. Good to hear.
Public Works was very excited that I told them that finance would cover the cost of that.
The assistant to the city manager
Mhm.
is in this budget new position or a new kind of position. That person hasn't been hired, is that correct as well?
So the assistant to the city manager retired. So we are removing that position and replacing it with 2 lower paying positions. The management analyst that is going to help somewhat with some of the duties that the assistant to the city manager did, and in addition to helping with some economic development items, and the deputy city clerk. So the total increase in salaries is just $35,000 total.
Okay. How it is. All right. And then the other note I have is what strategies do we have for increasing revenues without taxes?
So
That's why that kind of goes into the Golden Gate Fields, the potential. So is there a revenue stream that we're planning for or advocating for that could bring in additional revenue?
there's nothing that's not tax related that I know about. Like I explained in the presentation, there are only a handful of ways that municipalities can raise money. Taxes, obviously, but those all have to go to voters, or fees, which are basically just cost recovery. Part of the budget package that's going to council on Monday is an update to the master fee schedule, but there aren't really that many updates to the fee amounts. Because again, it has to be specifically related to cost recovery. You can't, at the point where you are charging someone for more than the cost of providing the service, it becomes a tax and has to be approved by voters.
Right, so that's why I'm trying to, I want to, a key focus of my participation in this committee is to try to be thinking about encouraging and advocating for new revenue streams that aren't through taxes. And for instance, there's a proposed development for the Albany Bowl of many, many units. And the scale of that, I believe, would create at least an increase in the property values, right? So, whatever the Albany Bowl is paying in property, that's the kind of stuff I'd like to be able to present. I have them when they look at it. I'm assuming the Albany Bowl is paying very, very low property taxes, and that if that gets developed into 3 to 5 stories of residential, and I don't know how many units, that there's a fiscal analysis that should be part and parcel of that idea of what it brings. And I don't think that necessarily happens with these kinds of things. There was another rather large scale proposal for Albany Hill over on Pierce Street. Okay. And as that was discussed and floated around the idea, I don't know if there was any analysis as to what kind of revenue that could bring in, both on every level.
So did
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Member Papalia. I think the questions that you're raising are questions that were talked about earlier in terms of the Economic Development Department and the role that they play in enhancing revenue for the city, and the reports that they could generate and the kind of policy that they can set, which would certainly increase the bottom line and improve the fiscal viability of the city. So those are good points, and I appreciate the points that you've made. I want to just poll the committee members. Are there any other thoughts or comments before we go to public comment? Because I do think we can move the conversation ahead. Member Papali, I didn't mean to stop you, but I do feel like you may have reached the end of your comments. Do you have any other thoughts or any comments you want to make before we sum it up here and move to public comment?
No, my other questions were already proposed by the other members.
Good. We're similar wavelength then. That's a good thing. Member Priven, I think you spoke early, but do you have any other comments or thoughts you want to add?
No, I mean, I have some thoughts about moving forward, action plan type stuff, but not sort of questions about the budget.
I would very much welcome those thoughts after we've had public comment, and then we can maybe wrap this up into sort of policy recommendations to council. So are there members of the public who would like to speak? If there are, please raise your hands and hands, however many you have, and we can go ahead. And also I'd like to just remind the committee members that if you're struggling with he, she pronouns, they is always a good one. I struggled with how to make that work in my own life, and I found it's quite useful to not struggle over, yes, it's a male, or yes, it's a female, but it's simply a they. So public comment, please.
All right, so we do have one, and I will bring her in. So Julie.
Hi, thank you everyone for this interesting conversation. I've never attended a financial, sorry, I got distracted by the cool timer that I'm now seeing in front of me.
Sorry.
So anyway, it's been interesting to listen, and I did a quick look at the budget. I have a lot of questions, but my main concern is if you step back and look at our city's priorities, and I know the city prides itself on saying that it's committed to equity and diversity. When I look, which means serving everyone well, including people who have lower income, people with disabilities, people who are experiencing homelessness. So I'm concerned about the disproportionate amount of money that goes into the police department. And I think I've heard that concern already expressed, and it sounds like maybe the city council expressed it too. And I calculate, according to my calculations, the police department gets 28% of the budget. And then I look at other things like trying to look at all my notes. Neighborhood services is $500,000, recreation, they're all very low compared to what is going into police department. And the police department is hiring right now, and their starting pay is $90,000, goes up to $121,000. I would encourage you to encourage the city to freeze that position and not hire. I know that they're starting to hire and they're planning on doing that, but if there's some way of pointing out that money could be used in different ways. For instance, 2 social workers would be paid the same amount as 1 police officer. And a lot of times the work that the police officers are doing could be done by somebody who doesn't have or a uniform or carry a gun. So that's the main point I wanted to make. I also wanted to comment on the community development. I think that is a really critical point, that more money should go into that. And I also had a question about where is the Albany Cares money or any kind of social services? Where does that money come from? I didn't see it in the budget, and I didn't know if it was like put in with something else. Maybe it's in neighborhood services. I wasn't sure. But and senior services, it gets $300,000. The city manager gets more than that just in pay. So I think there's a lot of disproportionate things are out of whack in terms of what we really want to say as the city of Albany, who's important and who's not important. And then I had a question just in general about the raises that the police, for example, get. When you see that they're like percentage rated raises, are those based on the initial salary, or are those based on every time they get a raise, then the next raise is based on their new salary? And I know I'm running out of time. And I also was sorry to hear that the unrepresented employees didn't get a raise this year or last. That seems to me, again, is that really who we are as a city? And I wanted to thank Chair Kerr for her comment about using they and getting away from he and she. It really does make life a lot simpler. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie Wickelstein. Are there other members of the public who would like to make any comments this evening?
There are no.
Are no other members.
Thank you. So in terms of bringing it back to the committee as a whole to discuss, there are a couple of things that occur to me that we could sort of possibly make some recommendations regarding policy on. One is the role of the Economic Development Department and their potential for bringing to the public eye and to the community at large information about revenue enhancement that Member Papalia has mentioned and that Member Trainer, Vice Chair Trainer has also mentioned, and that I think we all support. So I don't know how that would fit in terms of a recommendation. Maybe just our conversation this evening is enough to create that sort of interest. But the other thing that I'd like to sort of underscore at this point is the responsibility of individual department heads within the city. It seems to me that we as a committee and the city council as a representative body are coming to Finance Director Heather Rowden with lots of questions about accountability and what's this line item and where's that dollar amount going. And that responsibility actually exists within the chief of police, within the fire department head, chief of fire department, within the city manager. And I want that to be broadened. I mean, my personal feeling is that those individuals are employees of the public good, along with the finance manager, along with the city manager. And those individuals have a responsibility and accountability to us as individual citizens of Albany. So while I don't have a preconceived notion of how that would look in a report, in a finance report, I do think it's worthy of discussion about whether that's part of our policy recommendations to the council, that department heads have a place and a voice at this conversation. So I'll open it back up to the committee, and we can have a little bit of a discussion about items, those and others that you may have, please.
One item, was it the Economic Development Department, or is there also a committee? There's both. Thank you. Okay.
I would love to have a presentation from the police department and or the fire department, the two big parts of the budget, so that they could kind of help explain how their budgets work and this analysis. And maybe have someone from the Economic Development Committee come and present their strategies as well and how we can work, advise and give information for them.
So I'm not sure how to put this. I guess I think part of what I'm feeling is like raising the red flag a little bit to the city council in terms of, it feels to me like we're on an unsustainable path. We've identified all kinds of expenses and expense trends in terms of capital expenditures and pensions and things that are going to be going up or going to be not really fully reflected in this budget. And we're already budgeting at a deficit and don't have the savings to continue to do that for long. So I guess I'm feeling like part of what I'd like to see our role as is kind of, saying, look, we need to decide, are we going to be a big little city that offers all these services, which I personally want Albany to be offering and more, as the member of the public discussed, or whether we just have to say we can't afford it. But it feels like we're kind of at an inflection point. I just don't see how we can continue like this for more than a couple of years. So I guess my message, and part of it would be the message to the development, committee, or I forget exactly what it's called, economic development, to say, yeah, we really, the city really needs money, and we really need to keep that as part of part of the mission, and to quantify the impacts of this economic development, whether it's commercial or residential. And we need to be like really exploring other areas of revenue and so on. But like, we have limited amount of time to get this done, I think, because it just feels to me, like I said, we're on sort of an unsustainable path. So that's kind of like my overarching sentiment. And I guess that would be my message to City Council, that we need to get on this. And I think this committee has a big role in that.
I would agree. I think that it's probably time to do, and maybe Heather already has something like this, some sort of a projection that looks farther out than just 2 years, because we know there are a lot of really big expenses looming out there: pension obligation, asset replacement, just the fact that we continue to deficit budget. And we've kind of gotten away with that because of unfilled staffing, and finance department has indicated that they don't think that trend is going to continue. So we could actually end up realizing this budget deficit this fiscal year. And it seems like it would be a good idea to project out a little farther, 10 years, maybe 5 years, 10 years, and look at this and bring the fund balance into it, and give some illustrations of, if things continue on this path and we continue to run deficit budgets, this is where our fund balance will end up. It won't be possible for us to meet our 25% target, things like that. And also I was surprised to hear that we're doing the budget before we have the strategic plan. So to me, that feels like the cart before the horse. So how can you budget if you don't really know what your plan is?
Thank you, Member Tina. Those are excellent points. And I support and agree with them. Anyone else? Member Banker?
I think I kind of already said early on about the Economic Development Committee, and I agree with Mark on the red flags portion, as well as the manage, and your excellent idea as far as management and managers being involved in the process. I think those are really good.
I guess the only thing that I'd like to add to the conversation that we've had so far is the notion that I think that the city has an obligation to its citizens to not only present the projected deficit going forward, but the historical information that maybe we've been living with this deficit for a long time, and maybe if we looked historically at how close we were to the edge, we would have a little more comfort with where we are. I don't know that. I just think that if we are going to project, as Member Priven has suggested, how close we are budgeting going forward, we should also look at how closely we have budgeted in the past. So to maintain a historical perspective, I don't know if there is any program or data that Heather could easily tap into without crashing another spreadsheet that would help. But but if there is, history is helpful to.
So would you like me to address that?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So we did switch systems in fiscal year 2017. So, and it was kind of messy. So going back before 2018 is interesting. It is possible. When you look at the budgets going back farther, they don't provide a lot of detail. And when I was going through them, they did not previously budget for the pension unfunded liability payment. They got lucky that their other expenses did not, they didn't spend more in their other expenses, that they had the ability to pay the unfunded liability. And before it wasn't as much, you know, the unfunded liability was hovering around $1 million instead of, you know, the $2.5 to $5 million that we're now looking at, but they didn't budget for it previously. So I understand the looking at things historically, but there are a number of changes that happened. With one finance director, they were budgeting like I'm trying to budget, where all of the operating expenses were in the general fund and transfers were made. When it started to look like they were going to recognize a deficit, they started pulling expenses out of the general fund and putting them in special revenue funds. So all of a sudden you didn't have a deficit. And so it's messy when you start going back further. And there are changes that I can attempt to put stuff together, but there's going to be a lot of caveats to them, if that makes sense.
Thanks. That is helpful to understand the challenges that we look at. If there's no further discussion on the 5.1 presentation of the biennial budget, go ahead.
Just one other question about, you mentioned about the special revenue funds, and you know, do we budget expenses in the operating budget or over there? Are there other budgets for all these special revenue funds that we are not looking at?
Yes and no. So the operating expenses, no. The what you're looking at right now are all of our operating expenses. In what's going to council on Monday, the special revenue funds are addressed because I need them to authorize the appropriation from those funds to the general fund. So basically, in the packet that's going on Monday, there's a section specifically related to special revenue funds that gives the balance of the special revenue fund. It says how much we're using for operating. There's a handful of things that are budgeted, like our ACTC funds, Measure B, Measure BB. There are some dues that are budgeted directly to those special revenue funds, but that's specifically because we wouldn't pay those dues if we weren't involved with those taxes. So they're very small. Anything that is directly coded to those funds is very small and directly related to those funds. It also will show the CIP. A lot of special revenue funds, we I go back and forth with Public Works on this all the time. I want CIP to be construction in progress. They want it to be capital improvement plan. So their capital improvement plan is a line item on the thing that's going to council on Monday to show how it affects fund balance, to kind of show how any appropriations to the general fund to cover operating expenses, in addition to the previously approved CIP expenses, affect the fund balance of the special revenue funds. So there are other budgets. They aren't related to operating as much. They don't in detail, like it'll just be the expense to the special revenue fund is just a transfer out to the general fund. And I specifically say what it's covering, where it goes in the general fund. But the major detail of what we spend year over year is what you're looking at now.
2 follow-up questions. So you mentioned the council needs to approve the transfers from the special revenue funds. Is that the 4.15 million transfers in that you're proposing here? So they have to approve that.
Correct.
Okay. And then second question is, are you going to be providing some sort of a fund balance roll forward or analysis sort of showing what the special revenue fund balances are versus general fund and ins and outs and that sort of thing?
So the special revenue fund is going to council on Monday. I suggest going and looking at the 213-page budget document that is out there. It'll give you a lot more detail on how special revenue funds work with the operating budget. But it does, and my staff report there talks about the general fund balance. The general fund balance is really more of a conversation when we do the audit. When we do the audit is when we see, okay, what do we have left over in our fund balance? If we weren't budgeting a deficit, I would then come and say, okay, here's the amount over our 25%. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to put it in your reserve funds? Do you want to make an extra payment to our pension liabilities? But where we are budgeting a deficit that would bring us below the 25%, we have not suggested what to do with the amount above the 25%. But for me, the time to talk about that is during the audit. After we have done all of our year-end close process, we know really what we're returning to the general fund. But that's specific to the general fund. The special revenue fund balances, I do put forward in that document because they're related to fees and some other things, and they're not really, the general fund balance is kind of its own beast.
Thank you. Kim, I'm going to ask you specifically. I'm sorry, member Baker, do you have a comment?
Go ahead and finish and I'll ask, please.
Well, I was going to ask all of the committee members if they have any recommendations or suggestions about what we might resolve to suggest to council tonight regarding the 213-page document that was just posted today, or whether we just want to sort of be present at the meeting and individually comment on that, because we are at a disadvantage of not having had that information prior to this meeting. So you know, do we want to scramble or do we want to climb? That's the question. And member Banker, please go ahead.
I'm just, Heather, my one question for you, when you say that unrepresented staff haven't had an increase this year, last year or this year, are you talking both merits and COLA?
Just COLA.
So you receive merits?
If you are not at step 5, yes, you would receive a merit.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. To answer, Judy, to answer your question, I think we should go with flags and go with bullet points, and not get too much in the weeds. I think there's a lot of education that has to go on with this stuff, and I think if we keep it at a higher level, we're more likely to be heard. And if we stick with I was also like Kim, I like your down the line. I really like that 10-year look. Idea too. I think that, and I like going backwards, but if the backwards becomes confusing because of information not being reliable necessarily, then it can be more harmful than good sometimes. But it'd be good to go back as far as Heather feels comfortable looking at data, something like that. Anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where my thoughts are as far as how to move forward with the council.
Thank you. Member Papalia.
I think that this is, each member has expressed a point of view that can be crystallized into a sentence or two that I think we should put together and present to the council to let them know that we've been thinking about this, that we aren't just sitting back and waiting for theirs. I mean, this was our role, is to give them the input that that we all have. And I think they would welcome it if someone's very concerned about long-term budget deficit. That's a bullet point. I want to have income revenue streams that aren't through taxes, expanding of the tax base. Everyone's got their little point of view, and I would like us to put that together in a way that Heather can present it to the council at their meeting. That's on that one. And then I'd also want to mention, or I also am concerned about the fact that we're giving raises to those that are representative and none to the ones who are unrepresented. Is there a way, Heather, that they could get a COVID benefit, a bonus for working under those conditions that could then be paid for with this COVID money?
It's an interesting question, Member Papalia. Thanks. Heather, I'm going to take the spotlight off you. I don't know that you're prepared to respond to that. And so, Member Trainer, your hand is up, and Member Papalia, thank you. That's a very good recommendation, and I welcome a motion from you, seconded by anyone, where we could each add our 2 bullet points or 1.5 bullet points, or we could change the algorithm completely, and it could be arrows. So we could make a motion this evening, I think, and then we could subsequently submit recommendations individually as members of the committee to the council. So, Member Trainer, please go ahead.
I completely agree with Member Papalia's suggestion. I think it would be really productive for us to just go ahead and each, verbalize our bullet point and get this done now. There's a 213-page document that we'll have to look at, but there's just not enough time to really go through and analyze everything. But I think the point is that a lot of us are raising is that there's some concern about this kind of deficit budgeting, and it doesn't take much math to figure out that if you run a $2 million budget deficit every year, the reserve will be gone in 3 to 4 years, the fund balance.
So I am open to a motion that would allow us to prepare a document to be presented to the council in their Monday meeting with individual comments from each of us. I would like to suggest that we get this done within the next 24 to 48 hours. I don't even know. I don't know legitimately if we can do this or if it just should be public comment. I'm open to recommendations from the city clerk or from Heather about what the best approach on this is. But it seems like there's a consensus that we want to make a statement as individual members about our concerns.
So in general, if you're making individual statements, it would be during public comment. You can have a representative come as a representative from the finance committee. Normally it's the chair, but you can appoint whoever you want to talk. And that oftentimes gives you a little bit more communication with the council, and you're not necessarily within your 3-minute for public comment period. And then if, the representative forgot something or someone would like to bring up something else, they can make it during public comment. The city clerk texted me and said public comment.
Public comment. Okay. Yeah. I would be happy to make a statement as chair of the committee that we individually have concerns and we want the council, and I would open it with that, and then other individual members of the committee could state their concerns in the 3-minute timeline. So I would welcome any input from each of you about what you might want me to say as a report from the Finance Advisory Committee. And we could do it that way. And then you can enhance those comments as in your individual timelines that would come up. So I think, I don't know that we need a motion for that. Anybody have any thoughts? Member Becker, your hand is up, please.
Yes, just so you know, I'm traveling. I'm in Seattle right now. I'm actually on a road trip. I'm seeing my grandson for the first time in 1.5 years.
Oh, sweet.
So I can certainly submit comments to Heather possibly, but that would be the limitation I have as I'm on the road on Monday. So I'm not available to make public comment on that day. But
Member Becker, you can make comments directly to the council on the agenda topic. So you don't have to go through Heather. You can go directly to.
In writing.
Okay, I'll figure out how to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, whatever.
Eventually I'll get there.
So we can, I would have the same problem. I'm traveling on Monday, but we can make written comments through the city web page somehow to the council.
You can send them to me and I can forward them along. That's fine.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you.
Thank you.
And as you all do that, I will try to read them and try to summarize them and try to underscore the points that are being made
Tomorrow morning.
as best I can.
All right. Tomorrow morning.
Any other comments from the committee members?
Well, let's be real clear what the timeline's going to be. So today is.
Well, it's public comment, so it's 24 hours up to 5 p.m. before the meeting. Is that right, Heather? Yeah. So you have up until 5 p.m. on Monday to make your written comment to the city council regarding this 213-page document, which will be reviewed by them and us before we have those comments made.
And the city clerk says the email is citycouncil@albanyca.org. So if you'd like to send it directly to them or send it to me and I will forward it along, either way.
Great. Thank you.
Can you repeat that one more time?
citycouncil@albanyca.org.
Member Priven, any final thoughts?
No, so just so I understand, that some of us, if we choose to, will be sending written comments to that email address for the city council meeting, and then potentially also speaking public comment.
Yes.
Okay.
And those of you who are traveling, as the chair of the committee, I will try to read your comments and just make mention of them in my comments because I will be able to participate in the meeting. Okay, I think that finishes the 5.1 agenda items. Moving on to discussion of possible action items on matters related to the following items. We have none. There is an outstanding matter of our work plan and revisions to the work plan format from the city council. At this point, I don't have an update, and I don't think Heather has an update either about whether our format will need to change or whether the content of our proposed work plan. Thank you, Member Papalia and everyone, Member Trainer, Vice Chair Trainer. Thank you both and all of you for your work on the work plan that we have proposed. We're waiting to hear from the council whether we need to change the format or whether they will hear it as it has been submitted to them. So we'll just wait on that. And then future agenda items. I'm open to your thoughts.
Following up on the grant issues or grant questions, there was a member or a community member who spoke at the meeting last time asking about, I wish I had been there because I would have said, well, what is the grant? Would have tried to find out more about it. But I don't know if that's been pursued or what exactly that's about or anything, but when you get information from the members of the community about a grant that's hanging out there, we might want to look into it at least. That's all I'm thinking. I'm not too much in the grant world anymore, but can look at things if you want me to.
Yeah, I'm glad
Thank you.
you brought that up. I was thinking about that too. There was it was about the school zone grant or showers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other comments or thoughts for future agenda items? We have a recommendation from 2 committee members that we look at grant opportunities that we're aware of, and maybe even look at ways to find out more about grant opportunities. Other thoughts?
Will we be discussing financials, June 30 financials next meeting, or?
That'll be July.
Yeah, so generally your quarterly meeting is scheduled at a time that's like a month after the end of the quarter, so that I can prepare the quarterly financial update to come to you guys before it goes to council. So yeah, your normal quarterly meetings will always have a quarterly update.
Will that quarterly update go to council in September?
Yes,
Because they're dark in August.
correct. It will go in September.
Okay, so we'll see it. We will see the quarterly update at our next meeting, Thursday, July 29th at 7 p.m.
Yes.
Okay. We've taken care of an agenda item. Wow. So our next meeting is July.
Agenda item I'd like to propose.
Oh, please go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
I'd like to propose that we invite a member from the Economic Development Committee to come and talk with us about what they're doing and how our 2 groups can work together or help each other.
That's a great idea. Member Papalia, have you ever participated in an Economic Development Committee meeting? Or have you ever been a participant in any of their meetings or listened in?
Yes, and I have a good friend who's a couple friends.
Great. I have not myself, and I think it would be incumbent on us to take the initiative as well as expect them to come to us. Maybe you could listen in to the next meeting and maybe make a public comment to them in that meeting, in which you would make a friendly overture and say, we want to continue the conversation. We want to understand better. And then we could possibly make a request to them about whether we would. I'm just trying to figure out how to do this in a gentle way that would be received well.
I'd be glad to do that.
That'd be great. Good. All right. Any other future agenda items or comments?
Just a question to Heather in terms of the items that you'll be presenting. So the financial update is at each quarterly meeting. And then I imagine we'll also have some sort of an audit discussion at a future meeting. What meeting does that typically take place at?
So the goal is to get the audit completed by December 31st, and then it would probably go to you guys in January, ideally. We'll see if we can meet that deadline.
Okay. And are there any other major milestone type events that will factor into these meetings?
Annually, nothing that I can really think of. There are a handful of things that are coming up. I'm working on the contract with a consultant to review the business license tax, and that would come to you guys for review, before it went to council. But other than that, I can't really think of anything annually that would come up.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So we just have one meeting before November, is that correct? The July meeting? So I'd like to get more information about the, that initiative for sports betting at Golden Gate Fields. Because if we're gonna meet in July and it'll be on the ballot in November, it should be, it's gonna be an interesting topic of.
Are you, if I may ask, Member Papaya, are you tracking that on legislation, California Legislative Tracker, or do you have any information on how we're going to follow that?
Well, I I just read an article on it in the Chronicle
Uh-huh.
last week. that it
Okay.
came- and-
Does it have a number yet in the legislature?
Yeah, no, it's not it's an initiative. So it's going to be on the ballot.
Is there signature gathering happening on this?
It did that. Let me see. Okay, wait a minute. Here we go. It says, whatever I get, sports handle. Okay, that's what I found when I Googled it. I'm trying to. Tribal initiative should get go ahead Thursday. According to the Secretary of State website, the most recent update, 75.8% of the signatures were valid. Tribe collected 1.4 million. At current percentages, 1,081,000 would be valid. The question is when the referendum would be on the ballot and if it will have competition. So that's just what I Googled a couple hours ago and found.
Okay. So this will be a ballot initiative, not a legislative initiative.
Correct.
And you're asking that we do what with that?
That if it's going to be on the ballot, that we get information about it so that we can give our advice and our input and help, because let people know that let the citizens of Albany get the information that they need to understand how it would affect the city and our revenue.
So perhaps we could review the legislative analyst report on this in one of our future meetings. And this would be on the ballot in November, or?
It could be.
Okay.
So the question, I just started hearing about this. So,
Right. I'm just trying to put a timeline to what you've heard and what we could possibly recommend to council. So if there is a legislative analyst report on this by our November meeting, perhaps we could put it on the agenda for the November meeting, and we could then make a recommendation to council for December. Well, if that will work.
No. If it's going to be on the ballot whenever it's going to be on the ballot, we have to discuss it before it goes on the ballot.
So you're saying the July meeting?
Yeah, it's just, let's keep an eye out on what's happening, so that if it is going to happen, if it gets determined that it's going to be on the ballot in November,
Okay.
discuss it in July.
As we set the agenda for going forward, Heather, maybe you and I can put our heads together about that. Anything else? All right. Well, in that case, let me pull up my other screen. I think we adjourn. Any other comments? Okay. It is now 8:55 p.m. I am proud to say that we have finished this meeting in under 2 hours, and we are adjourned. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.